All right, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Enough to Keep Going podcast. I am your host for tonight, DBQ Hams. All three of us gentlemen are here in our seats, ready to talk about the week's news and what we've been playing for the last week or so. I'm back after I was out last week. Thank you, gentlemen, for stepping in and pretending that I was not important. So I appreciate that. No, I was out traveling and ended up with some family commitments and couldn't be here. Ended up spending a lot of time on my phone gaming and playing some of the closed beta for Torchlight Infinite. And, next week we get the launch of Apex Legend mobile. End of May, we also get the Ni no Kuni mobile game. Again, some type of gacha Studio Ghibli-esque game, but we're not going to talk about mobile games tonight. We've got plenty of other games to talk about and then a little bit of gaming news as well. So joining me tonight on the show, this is episode 241 for the week of May 12th. So if you're listening, watching down the road, just to give you a little time and space stamp. So Towmaster99, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you. Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back. And manning the boards over there is Game Logic. Game, how are you tonight?
Good, man. How are you guys?
Well, I'm here, right? I ended up, my travels took me to some enjoyable water parks, which then led to a nice little infection. So, but fortunately, it has not gone to my brain or my mouth. But if you see it creeping in, let me know. For tonight, I did get a chance. Once I got back, I did have a chance to chip away at some Borderlands. Finally, I saw credits on Borderlands 3 2.5 years later. I have a family member that she and I play Borderlands online together across the country, and we've been chipping away at it once a week, playing some of the DLC. But since we hit credits, we were able to kind of jump into Tiny Tina's Wonderland. And Game Logic, I know you played a little bit of Wonderlands. I am, from the moment go, I am just really enjoying the game. I think it's the change in setting, the moving it to kind of a fantasy realm doesn't drastically change the gameplay, but it lightens up the mood. It doesn't feel as kind of barren, apocalyptic aspects. I also find that it is already tighter in the writing. The fact that when it doesn't have to try to be a 40-hour game or something that's going to keep you sustained for multiple years, it can tell a tighter story. I've always found that the Borderlands DLCs I've enjoyed usually more than the main campaigns because they're more focused in terms of narrative, and they can, a joke lands a little bit easier in a 22-minute sitcom than it does in a 2.5-hour movie. So you don't have to stretch it nearly as far either. So that's but yeah, Tiny Tina has been fun. It's been enjoyable to play. Playing it on the PlayStation 5. I love the fact that there's an overworld map where you kind of wander around and to go from incursion to incursion. There's some random encounters there, but it also takes out the questionable, let's say, vehicle segments in any Borderlands game that always kind of feel like padding. Like spaces don't need to be this far apart, but they are because of the world design and the fact that they're trying to give you more to do. I like the tighter aspect of it all. So enjoying what I'm playing so far. I'm playing, I don't know, the Spore Master or something that spawns a mushroom guy along with me to attack things. The inclusion of magic makes it, mixes up the weapon combos a little bit. So you're shooting, waiting for your ults to pop, and being able to do that kind of changes the gameplay a little bit from jumping right from Borderlands 3 into Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. So, Game Logic, how far have you gotten? Have you had a chance to go back to it after you played it a couple weeks ago?
No, not very. It's kind of one of those, probably not the game's fault, just the way some things have gone this year and some of the conversations I've been in have caused me to kind of do some head fakes and kind of what I've been pursuing from a gaming perspective. So I unfortunately have not had a chance to get back, but it is a game that's on PC. I love the way it performs, and so it's readily and easily accessible in the backlog, and I'm sure I will get back to it to do some more playtime throughout this year. I was actually not a huge fan of the overhead world map. I would have preferred I hate to be old school, but I would have been fine with the old normal Borderlands approach to the map, that you kind of run around on, and you hit the M button and you see, everything that is applicable for that, warp world that you're in until you hit another kind of warp gate, and then you get a different map. So the kind of strategic overhead view map to me was a little much. It felt like a little too much maple syrup on top of, what was supposed to be a fairly lightweight adventure. Although, as you mentioned, you kind of calling them incursions, which I guess is appropriate given the release of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness and the scene the scene that we know show the Illuminati. I have not seen the movie yet, but that incursions definitely harkens back to that run in the Marvel universe. But I mean, those I was okay. I felt like the overhead map was a little too much drip, but those kind of where you go into segments of the map that you can just kind of see the entrance of, but you don't really know what's inside it. I thought that was pretty novel and neat. So I don't know. We'll see how the whole package comes together. The
side mission aspect of things. Yeah.
Right.
All right. Sneeze. Woo. Anyhow. Thank you, allergies. But it is one of the things that I appreciate from it is I have a physical copy, and in the physical copy, there's a little, a liner note that says we made this during COVID from our homes, remotely. And I think that overhead map is probably part of that. It's a scope factor in terms of being able to churn something out within the framework and the conditions that they had. So. But yeah, I could see if you're coming to it looking for another Borderlands, it does switch things up a little bit, as you said, does a head fake a little bit as well. So, Game Logic, if you've been doing some head fakes in terms of your gaming, what have you been playing this past week here? Yep, this would be the part when your microphone would work.
Yeah, sorry, I was actually, I knew where my mic and the mute button were. I was looking for my mouse. I was like, where the heck did my cursor go? So, because I actually needed to look at the agenda because you caught me with
the quick. You're talking about Halo Infinite, right? Right. Thursday night when there's a Halo show, you're talking about Halo Infinite.
Right. So that's exactly what I've been playing. Is Halo Infinite. It's kind of interesting. I caught a bug which is a little reminiscent of that Call of Duty bug that I had a couple of years ago. And I really kind of been inspired by the kind of tight weapons play mechanics that are in it. It kind of broadens the portfolio of games that are kind of of that ilk that I've come to find enjoyment in the last couple of years. Call of Duty, Black Ops Cold War, and Destiny 2. And as I've always mentioned, Halo is kind of slightly different, kind of on that sliding bar of physics, right? If you have Call of Duty all the way to the right and kind of Destiny 2 kind of all, in the middle, Halo I've always, felt is the one all the way on the far left. It's a little quicker now. I think I've mentioned on the show, it's a little faster now, feels a little lighter. You don't feel as much of this like kind of plodding, almost mech kind of caricature. I predominantly play Slayer, but I've also been messing with... I primarily play Team Slayer, but I've been messing with Tactical Slayer, which I really like, just because it kind of simplifies things and kind of dresses things down and brings things down to, by stripping away some of the additional elements that you get in Team Slayer. I did play one round of Last Spartan Standing and actually kind of like it because it pulls away a lot of the things that I don't like about Battle Royales. The map isn't as big. It's not as heavyweight of a do loop, right? It's not like 10 minutes of looting for a 2-minute engagement. And so it keeps things a little tighter. Engagements happen to occur slightly more frequently. And off playing the first time, I came in 5th. So I was a little encouraged to, kind of keep at it. I haven't gone back and played another mode yet. The unfortunate story of Halo Infinite is it's a really great shooter wrapped in a really crappy progression system.
That's what I was just going to ask, how your experience has been with season 2 here, because it's gotten plenty of press, and as you said, not necessarily positive.
Yeah, well, the thing, I mean, there are some things to be disappointed in with Halo Infinite, and then I feel there's maybe some things to be absolutely outraged about. And I haven't leaned as far over as a lot of the fake outrage community that happens on Twitter with like all the ranting and raving about Halo Infinite. And I get it. If you've been playing it for 20 years, then maybe you were expecting, something more, but we always kind of come back to that. I'm like, with Destiny 2, right? Destiny 2 players don't hate anything more than Destiny 2. And so, if you've put 2,000 hours into a game, maybe you should kind of recognize that your expectations for that game aren't in sync with what the developer thinks the mainstream is and the thick part of the bell curve that they need to target. But one of the things that really rubs my skin the wrong way is there was the promise at the outset of this whole thing that you would be able to progress the battle passes like forever. And that was one of the kind of compensating factors for a lot of the other things that were bad. Well, you kind of can, but what you have to do is you have to set one of the battle passes as active. And so while you are gaming, you are only earning against one battle pass at a time. That is incredibly frustrating, right? To have had, and it's a kind of combinatorial effect thing, right? It's to have had insufficient content in season 1 to really keep people engaged. Now, there are lots of people who did the grind and pushed all the way through that, but like battle passes are already a grind. And you can kind of see the earning factor, right? Like Call of Duty always does this thing where like you earn battle pass, but then like as you get up to like the 88th level or something, you can feel like the brakes turn on, right? You can feel the driver jamming those brakes on the bus, and you can feel the progression rate like grind to a halt. And as you kind of really have to churn through those last like 12 levels or so, Halo Infinite feels like that all the time. And there was a certain extent to which I was willing to kind of accept that just as a kind of differential product on the market. But then when you add on to that, oh, well, now I didn't push through all the battle pass levels for the first battle pass in season 1. So now I've built up what is essentially this battle pass debt that I have to overcome in season 2, which also kind of sort of arguably has insufficient content, right? And I've mentioned that I'm a map guy. Like what really gets my blood pumping with Call of Duty is the new maps, because that creates a new tactical problem, and it creates a new way that people are kind of running plays, and it creates a new set of offensive and defensive geometric problems and puzzles to untie and unfold. And it resets the battlefield in terms of competitiveness amongst a lot of the players, because Some people will go on to new maps and they won't be that good while they're trying to figure it out. And then sometimes you'll get a new map that'll click with you, and that'll allow you to kind of have an advantage for the first, couple of weeks. None of the new maps are available in Team Slayer. There's only 2 maps, and neither of them are available in Team Slayer. And so that's really, so what we have is this, and I know it's a past cultural, legacy that exists within the Halo community, which is that I feel the game is heavily tilted and heavily tuned to only rewarding the people who walk the entirety of the mall and stop in every shop, right? It doesn't reward the people who want to play Team Slayer. Whereas on Call of Duty, look, if you just want to play Team Deathmatch, then you earn at the same rate as everyone else, right? You got to monkey a little bit with the challenges, but the way the challenges are structured there, the challenges are just bonuses, whereas in here, the challenges are imperatives. Like, if you're not doing the challenges, you're not earning really against the battle pass. One of the things that's thoroughly frustrating is last night I was playing, I had a double XP token kicked in. I was getting into beyond my 5th match. I did incredibly well, and I earned 100 XP, and it's 1,000 XP per level. So I earned 1/10, right? And I'm like, it's 1:00 in the morning. I'm trying to figure out, how much more of this am I going to do before I go to bed? And I'm like, I've got to play 2 more matches, right, to up a level. And I'm like, it's just kind of ridiculous. So, if you're a Halo fan, the cosmetics are neat and nice, but there's not too much variance in them. The UI is quite frankly just horrible in the way you kind of have to drill down 3 and 4 levels into the UI to even understand what the heck it is that you have. And another problem with the UI is the Battle Pass UI. You can't equip items from the Battle Pass UI, and the Battle Pass UI is a level down in the store, whereas your armor configuration UI is a level down in Customize. So I have to go over to store, drill a level down to look at what I've earned on the Battle Pass. I actually have to drill 2 levels down because now I have to select which Battle Pass I want to look at, find the thing that I most recently earned, pop 2 levels up, go over to Customize, pop a level to 2 levels down, actually pop into the global armor. I have to go into Customize, then I have to select armor. Now I'm in the armor menu. Then I got to dive another level down to the specific component, right? And if it's an attachment, I have to arm the component, select the component, or I can select the component, but if I haven't armed it, it's not actually on me. So either way, I got to do 2 actions. So let's just say I got to equip the component, drill down another level into the component, and then look at the attachments once I'm in the separate component UI. So this is not a lesson in it is not a good lesson in UI design for any young developer who's looking at it, right? It's, we have principles that we talk about, which is about not making customers overly navigate, right, and run a bunch of gymnastics around the UI. We have things like modals that are available if you just want to kind of select a thing and then have a pop-up overlay appear over the UI. And we talk about not forcing the customer to have to kind of navigate away from a level, right, to do an action, right, that's like a concurrent action. I'm in a window looking at a shoulder pad. I should be able to equip that shoulder pad there. I shouldn't have to go over there and window shop and then remember what the heck that thing is and then pop 2-3 levels over right into a thing to equip it. So it's very analogous to when I owned my Mustang Mach 1. And when I owned my Mustang Mach 1, I would walk over to the window in my apartment. I would look down at it and I'd be like, this is as I'm getting older. I'm like, frack that, man. I don't look forward to getting in that thing and driving it, right? But as soon as you get in that car, right, and get behind the wheel, right, it clicks and you're really into it. And that's what Halo Infinite is. It's being in a match in Halo Infinite is being inside my Mustang Mach 1, behind the wheel, 2 hands on it, right, going 120 miles per hour. But the moment I'm out of a match, right, I'm right back in that window looking down at that thing, right, regretting the fact that I own it and looking forward to owning a 4-door sedan.
It's a nice analogy, right? That idea of the kind of mental buildup we have getting into something, even when we enjoy the moments that it provides. I know on the Battle Pass piece, I do remember the messaging that you could, that you would have to equip. You'd have to make one Battle Pass active, and that's what you'd earn on that. It wasn't stackable. But I remember that digging into things around release and not necessarily it being kind of out front and center, because that does does change that. Yeah,
it's not a bumper sticker anywhere in Joseph Statton's Twitter account. Right, and so
fair enough.
It's essentially a bamboozle as far as I'm concerned, and there's no really good valid reason for it not to be concurrent when you've paid for both.
Yeah, I think that's a good question for battle passes in general, right? Like, if you've purchased them, why not allow somebody to stack them as long as you're purchasing the next one? Then that seems, you're already invested into that infrastructure. You've given them the financial piece of that. At that point, there's nothing more for you to pay out, and they've already gotten that. So,
right. To put it another way, right? It's not to say that if I were to not say it's a bamboozle, right? The point is that it was advertised as if it was a competitive differentiation and advantage in comparison to another shooter. And in reality and execution, it's not. It pretty much flattens to be the exact same thing. I would honestly rather just have lost, right, my ability to track into Battle Pass 1 and just been forced to move over to Battle Pass 2.
Well, and the problematic piece is that, as you said, if the menus are not great to begin with, and over time, in theory, that this is something that is sustained, that, now you're navigating one more level or multiple levels as those battle passes begin to stack. So, Tao, you are not afraid of a little bit of menu navigation and crafting. So you've been playing some Ark as usual. Is this on a private server, on a shared server? Are you getting your dinosaur riding in here?
Yeah, and before I go to that, just back to Halo Infinite for a second. I'm not a programmer by any means, because I just can never. I didn't have patience for programming. Let's just put it that way. But I don't see how you couldn't have like more than one going at the same time. Like, if it's just like an experience counter, basically, you could just unlock stuff. Now I know, like in other battle passes, I don't think there's any other battle passes that do that I can think of right now. The closest thing I can think of is back in the day in Fortnite. Not the whole battle pass, but like certain characters had like multiple levels that you got unlocked doing certain things, and that carried over to like future seasons, but not the whole battle pass. So, and at that point, it was just I'd be playing. I could even be like a third or halfway through like the next season, and all of a sudden I see a little pop up saying, "Hey, you unlocked this for this character." Oh, cool. Because I just totally forgot about it. So I don't know how or why that's happening, but like I said, I'm not a programmer, so maybe it's harder than.
No, it's a business reason. It's from a code perspective, it's no different than there's a timer running over here in OBS and there's a clock running over here in this screen, right? The computer has the ability to run two different clocks, right? Or to run, a memory accumulator that's keeping track of like multiple things that are going on, or scores in different columns, right? It's entirely there are things that I want to say. I won't say it's entirely a schema to punish the customer, but it's a way to cordon the customer into not to make them feel like they have flexibility and options, but not really to allow them the full freedom to take advantage of it concurrently, which is just a pricing model thing.
Yeah, because obviously. They want you to keep going on that game. So yeah. And then just the other thing real quick is last weekend when we were talking about it, Halo Infinite, I actually was going to play it, and the first night that was on me. I didn't have the game installed anymore on my machine because I had got a new excuse me, a new hard drive, or another hard drive I should say, for my PC, and I had uninstalled when I was reinstalling games, and I just forgot about that. So I installed it that Thursday night. And then the next night, on Friday, I actually went to go try to play it, but I never ever get into a game. Like the first time I left it for like 5 minutes, and I was like, what's like I never hit a game. Like it was maybe a little bit later, like my time, 11 o'clock or so p.m. So I don't know.
What
It was just
mode
kind
were
of
you
weird.
trying to play?
Just the Slayer modes. I just picked which you would finger. Is pretty popular. So I thought I'd be able to jump
One
into a game.
more of a server issue than it is a server population
Yeah,
issue.
maybe it was just thinking that, and that was the only time I only tried those. Well, that one night technically to try to play, actually get into a game. So I don't. Yeah, maybe they were just having issues or maintenance or something. I don't know. But
And you said you were trying that on console or on your PC?
That was on PC. Yeah.
So there were. I mean, I continue to have issues to this day on PC, particularly if you're going through the Xbox app. I have numerous friends who have tried to tell me, the trick and the secret is to get rid of the Xbox one and download the Steam one. But, I paid for the single player campaign, so I really don't want to pay for it twice. But to this day, as a software guy, it's caused me to shake my head. I can launch 2 instances of the game and they will both run at the same time. Like that is just not a normal thing. Like software applications that are less complex than games will frequently pop up and say, "Hey, you can't start like a second instance of it." Now, there are some low-level applications like Microsoft Excel. I should be able to run 2 instances of that, or the Chrome browser. I should be able to run 2. Like a video game, you should not be able to run multiple instances of. That makes little or no sense, and I don't even know. Like, is it running over in another thread? Could I theoretically get into 2 matches at the, like there should be some code that locks that out. So that happens, and then what happens right now it's even though I have it loaded on an SSD, it is incredibly slow to launch out of the Xbox launcher, and when it comes up, it's given me a whole series of errors. I mean, the first night I downloaded the update, I couldn't even play it, I couldn't even launch it. But eventually I've got it going. But what it does now is it gives me an application error pop-up dialog every single time it launches. But if I click that away, then like a few seconds later, the game actually launches and goes into run. So there are problems.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I'm glad it was just me. All right. So yes, Ark. So like I mentioned in our chat, like I haven't really had a chance to play too much this past week, and when I did, I mean, Ark is pretty much taking over my whole gaming time. It's pretty much a resource or a time hog, just because the nature of it. Just you have to craft and gather material and stuff like that. So, and I am playing on a dedicated server right now, so I can jump in anytime I want, or my son, because we play together a lot. We don't have to. Before I was playing with my son's non-dedicated like instance, and I had to, obviously he had Beyond. We were tethered together, and it was just kind of a big deal. So I've been plugging away at this, and even though like it is a time hog, I find myself, and I'm not usually like the one, like a lot of people, like sometimes when they get in these type of games, they kind of, I get lost, but they get overwhelmed because there's so much to do, and you can, there's so many different things you can do, but I usually just like set a goal for myself when I'm going to play. And for this game, I got to at least have an hour that I know I'm going to be able to play to do anything productive. So I always try to give myself a goal. Like here, I got like last weekend I did, there was, the different like, structures you can build, and like, not materials, but, like ovens and stuff like that you can build. And there's like advanced, as you progress through the levels, you get more advanced materials that you can use and stuff like that. So I was building a industrial forge. So I just had like a regular one that takes wood or another material that you can use to for the burning to smelt metals and stuff like that. But when the industrial forge, you have gasoline that you can use, and it like does things like I can have a stack of say like 50 scrap metal, and it'll do it like in like a minute, or maybe even like 45 seconds, like super fast, other than like the minutes it would just take to do like a handful of material beforehand. So it's super fast. So I just gave myself that goal, and I did that. And throughout the week, I was just kind of building out my base. I've been doing that. So I like try to do that, just give myself a little goal, so I don't get overwhelmed. And not so much I get overwhelmed, but I get the Skyrim itis where it's like, oh, there's a shiny.
There's always something over there. Yep.
Yeah. So I'm trying to do better and doing that nowadays, especially with this game, and probably future games that I'll hopefully be playing. Some have been delayed that we'll talk about later, but otherwise, I've just been just been plugging away at that and still enjoying it. I still have like a lot to go in that game. As far as there's kind of a loose story that runs throughout the game, and there's like some bosses you can defeat, and there's like more than one. And I think that was added like later on, like years after the initial one, because I don't think there was any kind of bosses before. But it's going to take me a while to get to that point, just because you have to get so many animals to defeat these bosses, because they're like super powerful. So it's going to take me a while. But otherwise, yeah, I'm going to just keep plugging away at that one for now.
So let's jump into a little bit of news. And while ARC may be a long time commitment, we had a Nintendo Indie Direct yesterday. We had a variety of smaller indie titles, some of which we knew about beforehand, some of which were new. So I'm going to run through a couple that kind of stood out to me and give you guys the opportunity to kind of jump in and any others that stood out to you as well. We got a couple games that came out just yesterday. So Minimoto, which has been out on mobile and computer for quite a while, the kind of subway building aspect, is out on Switch yesterday. Also, you had Soundfall. So Soundfall is a rhythm action RPG, kind of Diablo-like with gear, but all rhythm-based. So your combat, your attacks are rhythm-based. Your reloading is rhythm-based. You can do a little bit. You can fail when your gun jams to some degree when you miss that rhythm, but it's from what I've been reading, pretty forgiving. But it looks beautiful. It's on everything at this point. It's on Switch, PC, Xbox, and PlayStation. I looked at it on PlayStation 5 because of the rumble and the DualSense and how it pulses with the rhythm of the game. It also had a little bit of an announcement around. There was announced already last year, but Batoria Lost Haven is an isometric RPG, kind of twin stick combat. Looks pretty good. There's another Wild Frost was another one that kind of stood out to me. A little cartoony in terms of its aesthetic, but it's a strategy, tactical, deck building roguelike. So it's Slay the Spire with a little more cartoony skin over the top of it. Coming out this winter on Steam. It's listed for winter of 22. Gunbrella we had heard about previously. Gunbrella is from Devolver Digital. It's from the team that made Gato Roboto, a cute little Metroidvania platformer. Silt is a game that I played a demo of on PC. So you're underwater scuba, and there's some, both creatures and exploration and some kind of destructive force that is getting you as well. And so there's some exploration there. There's you have the ability to kind of take over some fish, move your, kind of occupy the soul of some of the sea life to be able to help solve some of the puzzles as you navigate around. At least you did in the demo that I played earlier this year. Trying to think of any others that stood out. We had a couple that we knew about already. Got a sizzle reel of things like Card Shark, which is there's a demo out on Steam. Also now a demo on Switch. This is the one where it's a card game, a deck game, but you're also part of the narrative is that you're cheating, and so you're also doing some sleight of hand in order to keep winning as well. Cursed Golf is coming out on a whole bunch of things. This is the kind of pixel golf through hell that was out there. Anything else to you guys that stood out as something interesting or something that you didn't know about previously?
Besides the Umbrella, which you had mentioned, Ooblets, which is kind of in the vein of Animal Crossing, those type of games.
And Ooblets has been out on Xbox, and now it's coming to which makes sense. Yeah. I mean, it's a good fit in terms of kind of Animal Crossing, Pokemon-like, with a cute art aesthetic. Yeah,
so kind of more just a relaxing game to get into. I like Head, which actually looked pretty cool. You have like electricity obviously going through your body, and as you land on different platforms and stuff, it kind of like activates, I guess, like if there's some sort of action that needs to be done, or you could like throw your head and activate something for like kind of puzzle elements throughout the world. That looked pretty cool actually, and I don't remember hearing about that one before, but that looks good.
No, I think that was a brand new one. Yep.
Yeah. Tab's a total accurate battle simulator, which has been on, I think, PC and Xbox for a while, and probably PlayStation. Actually got it on, I think, through Game Pass. That's coming to Switch, so I might jump on that and play that. Kind of like I said, it's a battle simulator, so you can have like ninjas versus Vikings or wizards versus like samurais and stuff like that. So like pretty cool.
Yeah, it's one of those kind of physics-based co-op aspects of things, right?
Yeah. We kind of you kind of set the stage, and you can just let them fight, or at least on the Xbox version, you can control individual like soldiers or units, I should say, and kind of take control of them. So I don't know I'm assuming you'll be able to do that, and then it kind of goes into a first-person view when you do that. So that's kind of cool. And then Gibbon Beyond the Trees looks kind of cool just because of the graphic style and kind of that. It's like a kind of a swinging mechanic, I guess. You're going throughout the world doing, so that looks pretty cool too.
Yeah, that was announced previously. It's been out on Apple Arcade for a while, and it's coming to Switch. So
cool. Yeah, those are my picks.
All right.
If you had anything game.
I'm going to jump from small games.
That's a good idea. Go ahead and jump.
Jump from small games that are coming out to big games that are getting delayed. So we had a tweet this morning, right? In terms of Bethesda announcing the delay of both Redfall, which was supposed to be coming sometime this year. It was supposed to be earlier than Starfield, which had an actual November date attached to it, but both are now being delayed until 2023. I can't say that I'm too surprised, but I always anticipate, especially Starfield, what Bethesda game hasn't launched in some type of janky state. So I'd rather have them delay it than have a Fallout 76 type of launch again for them. So, we've had a series of delays. We had some gameplay footage from Gotham Knights this week, which Gotham Knights was supposed to come out last fall, is now coming out this fall. We've had other things get pushed back and around. Game you talked about, Doctor Strange at the beginning of the show, the Midnight Suns, the strategy game got pushed back. It was supposed to be out this spring, is now coming late 2022. So it seems to fall all in that same line of big games on new consoles with COVID really kind of slowing down the pipeline in terms of development. Thoughts here, gentlemen? Surprised? I mean, I can see a little disappointment. I remember us talking about Redfall last year after the Microsoft game showcase. And, Redfall is that kind of gothic, vampiric, Back for Blood, Left 4 Dead type of 4-player co-op. So, any thoughts here?
I was, I guess, a little surprised with Starfield just because they had that firm date on there. I was surprised, but then I was like, yeah, it kind of makes sense because I'm assuming it's going to be a huge game, and they definitely want to get that thing buttoned down as much as they can before release. Like you said, not to have a Fallout 76 a fiasco again. So I can understand it. I mean, it's. And I nowadays I don't, even before like COVID and stuff, like if something was delayed, it was like, cool, let's, give it some time. Hopefully, for the most part, most of the time when they delay it, it does become a better product, or at least it looks like it does. So, and Redfall, like, I don't think was there ever even like a block of time that they gave for Redfall, other than maybe just saying fall or spring or something like that.
I think it might have been spring or summer 2022, but. Or it just was 2022 after the announcement trailer, but I don't know that we've ever gotten any updates after that.
Yeah. I can't even remember any other updates past that, right? Like they've never really shown anything.
No, it's been pretty quiet. Yeah, Arcane's been really quiet about it. Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, that's fine. Like I said, it's probably for the best, especially for the Bethesda studios. So to get everything good for that one.
Your takes, Game Logic.
Yeah, I am not nearly so understanding. Right? It's
okay.
I mean, Starfield was announced in 2018. It was announced 4 years ago. Todd Howard pegged it to the release date that was kind of their comfort window for like their big Skyrim releases, right? Their 11, 7, whatever dates, like these things that are now like embellished within like the Bethesda loving community as like famous release dates for games. And like, there was no reason to do that, right? So they voluntarily leaned forward and leaned into that. Like I just no, I don't get it. Like, so
yeah,
go ahead.
Speculate here. I mean, in terms of development wise, probably there's not a reason to do that. In terms of investors, in terms of market awareness, that date came. It came at a time when there were questions around what if Starfield was going to be Microsoft exclusive. There were questions around what Bethesda was, the value of that acquisition. It seemed to kind of line up in terms of this was much more of a boardroom push to hit a target than an actual development target.
But my problem with that, so first, I guess professionally, I have a major problem with that across the gaming industry as it is. Like when, as a software engineer, a very big thing in our domain academically has been pushing this increased performance in good software estimates. And and the gaming industry just is the one market segment that is just not getting it at all, right? And lots of software development gets it wrong. But I would say from an academic perspective, from a domain perspective, from a cohort perspective, there has been a push, I feel like, unilaterally upon us all as professionals to tighten up in the way we do software estimates, right? We're all exposed to these case studies of how software estimates have been done poorly and are being given tools and educational paths to improve them. And we're taught all of these things about risk management and yada, yada, yada. So my thing is if in the gaming industry, you're not automatically padding your software estimates with an additional 6 months of slip time, that's a problem.
Yeah, that's true.
And from an investor perspective, I understand why there would be that impetus, but then I'm like, but the backside of that is now if my big release doesn't happen in holiday of 22, I've got to revise guidance.
Oh yeah, right. I think that's a key part here is that if this slips, it's also probably even going to slip out of their fiscal year. If that pushing both of them back until 2023, one might hit in March, but getting both of them within this fiscal year is not. And the sales piece, as you said, right? If it's not coming out holiday, that is going to factor into things too.
Right, because you're not going to need enough time to get those revenue reports back to incorporate them into your earnings report. So like I just don't get it. And then if we isolate to Bethesda, right, don't even consider them as part of the larger Microsoft conglomerate, I'm like, this is a point where you have to reinstill confidence in your faithful because you really borked up Fallout 76, right? And there's, I feel like, a skinnier percentage of your fan base that stuck with you through Fallout 76. There are still some Bethesda crazies out there, right, that are still kind of on that pogo stick, right, and insistent that, like, Bethesda is the best thing since sliced bread, and they're never going to drop that loyalty. But it's a much smaller fan base from my optics than it was in 2018 when Todd Howard took the stage. And like people were, this raucous, rabid fanfare, and I was like, "What are you guys so happy about?" Like, right? And you talk about better to push out because of their janky releases. And my problem is that for Fallout 76 was a janky release because of their attempt to pivot into a new business model. They're still going to have a janky release from a software perspective because every Bethesda release is janky from a software perspective, and their faithful laugh it off as part of the unique character of the game.
Right, it's all just part of its charm.
Right. Now, in this instance, it might be okay because they're isolating to Xbox, right? It to me, from an outside observer, it ceased being funny when they were multi-platform releases because the bugs that were over on the PlayStation side were game-ending bugs.
Oh, sure. Just the memory creep. I mean, the memory leak that Skyrim had for years on PlayStation 3.
Right. So then you talk about Redfall, and my whole problem or concern with Redfall has been and I love Arcane Studios. They are, I have to go back and look at my actual list, but I will venture to say that when I finally, after 40 plus years of playing games, I really sat myself down and forced myself to come up with my top 5 development houses of all time. And I'm pretty sure Arcane Studios was up there. So I love Arcane Studios, but I had to admit, this is a studio making its first attempt at a multiplayer PvP live service game, which I assume is going to have a battle pass, on a regular development cycle. And, that's a challenge, right? That's a challenge not just to make a good game, but then to figure out the progression piece of it and the monetization piece of it and get that right. And you're doing vampires, right? Which is just something, despite the fact that, everybody's rah-rah over Blood Hunt right now, which I think that game is overrated. That to me is still a challenge, right? That's just not kind of the straight stick kind of setting and dressing that typically goes with that type of environment for your enemies. Or I guess maybe that's a little overly. I guess it's not too far different from kind of the zombie approach, because you're just going to have, different types of vampires. But in terms of the protagonists, right, the protagonists have powers. They're not just, weapons carriers. So it's going to be a tough thing to nail that one down. And again, I go, Arcane Studios release cadence isn't normally for them to put out a game, in the holiday season preceding and then put out another game. I mean, Tal, you said there was no official release date, but I think, right, wrong, or indifferent, I think everybody was anticipating that should have been a summer game, right? Something preceding the holiday season, just given all the time that they had. And I say it was going to be a PvP game, but by the same token, it was only going to be a PvP game. So it's not like you're off writing some big narrative and have to weave that all together. And you should actually be able to pull that together, actually arguably in a shorter development life cycle than, right, some of your other games, given the kind of the limit of its constraint of like how far you're going to journey around and how many different environments. So it's just problematic, right? And then in fact, for them to have been leaning on Bethesda, the publishing house that they just acquired, for what were going to be their 2 major releases in 2022, that's a problem. So to bring this full circle, the reason I'm kind of bothered by this whole thing is that, and Tao and I talked about this a few weeks ago, Game Pass was 2017. It's been 5 years. The first studio acquisitions were 2018. It's been 4 years. They've acquired more studios since then. From a operational model perspective, from a program management model, this is a house that should be like massively powerful, right, in terms of what it is able to do. And they should be able to, in my mind, thrash resources and money around in a way to compensate for a lot of the challenges. This is an organization that should not have expectations of barely being able to do what a Nintendo or a Sony should do. This is an organization that should have expectations to easily exceed them, and has had the time to kind of retool and reorganize and reorient that power into an effective delivery model. And they haven't. And what that does is, for me as a gaming fan, what that does for me is, I talked about it on another podcast last night, what I would love at the end of this console generation to have 3 fierce competitors who are at relative parity, and for that to drive an incredibly competitive gaming market, which thereby causes each of the separate vendors to deliver incredibly high value, and for us to have a ton of different choices. I would argue right now that we don't really have a ton of different choices, even though I got myself lathered up to say that we did last night. In the wake of today's news, I'm like, your options really this year, I mean, to be quite honest, I think we actually have very few options this year, right? Because Sony doesn't really have a slate, right, for this holiday season. I don't know,
right? I mean, we assume God of War, but who knows at this point if that changes.
Yeah, and I haven't bought into the God of War thing because that's been a senior art designer or something on the game. I haven't heard that. I haven't heard 2022 officially from a studio head or a creative director or a producer.
I thought that it came out in one of the state of plays that they.
I don't know. I'll have to go back. Where I came across it was there was an animation guy who like isn't even a long-term like permanent employee, just recently joined the company, was tweeting that the game was coming out right this year, and I was like, I'm not taking that as gospel. So.
Well, and even if it was in the state of play, we just got done talking about Starfield, right? Like, it doesn't matter at this point if you announce a date because people are still going to push back.
Yeah, I mean, but I'll say if God of War does come out in the fall, then it's going to stand alone, right? And I mean, that's a great option and a great choice. But I don't know that Nintendo has anything big on its slate coming out this fall, and that may just be because I don't pay as much attention to Nintendo. But and now Xbox doesn't really have anything. You've got Forza Motorsport coming out, in the fall, but that's not
even guaranteed at this point either, is it?
Well, here's what I would hope. What I would hope is that the reason this got announced today was because they knew doggone well to get out ahead of June 12th, and there would be no sense in marching into that thing and saying something different and then turning around thereafter and reporting the delay.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like, this is a far enough press cycle away that it gives everybody a chance to have this discussion and then be able to focus on in June.
Yeah, and it might be, because there's two other bits of bad news, Halo Infinite Season 2's launch and the network outage this weekend. There's a part of me that also says, from a business perspective, why wouldn't I dump more bad news into the cycle? I'm already getting beat up. Like, why would I wait, right? What's frustrating from an optics perspective is, one of the things that went around on Twitter today was people were like, everybody was so high on Microsoft like a week ago. How in the world in the course of 7 days, like due to this one announcement, is everybody down? And I'm like, because it wasn't just the one announcement, because since they reported high financials and high unit sales, and Aaron Greenberg did his VG charts thing, and we heard about lots of, high percentages in improvements year over year, literally since they walked away from that financial earnings call, we have had the network outage, Halo Infinite Season 2, and now this delay. And I'm like, then when and so walking into that earnings call, I will say my own perspective has been, I let the thing about the initiative go. I let the thing about Undead Labs go. I let Halo Infinite Season 1 go. I let all these things transpire, and as I'm kind of running the accumulator in my own head about how confident do I feel about Microsoft, how good do I feel about Xbox, I go, the dream that I was presented in 2018, right? That visionary thing that I walked away from Phil Spencer being on that E3 stage, over time has been eroded. And my confidence in that dream, just like the hope of the ideal of Star Citizen that I had, and the hope and the ideal of, quite frankly, Halo Infinite that I've had, has just eroded to a point now where I don't know that they are showing the template or becoming the case study for the different innovative approach and business model that one could take to the industry and would really spearhead this refreshed, re-energized level of competition amongst the three vendors, which up until now has kind of been looking like it was going to be the most intense that it's ever been. I commented last night that, even though the console wars were famous between Sega and Nintendo, the reality is, from a historical perspective, they were really kind of trying to do the same thing, right? But right now you have three vendors that in, all of gaming history are really pursuing three very differentiated competitive paths. And that was creating a great deal of differentiated productization and different business models and different ways of kind of onboarding into those systems. But as I look at this Microsoft thing now, I'm like, if you've got $500 in your pocket and you're sitting on the fence waiting to make a decision and a choice, I can't imagine a reason for you to take that $500 and go buy an Xbox.
So I'm gonna, yeah. I mean, I think that last statement is a good barb to throw out there, right? Like, I still think that Game Pass for somebody new to or somebody coming back into gaming, Game Pass still presents a really strong value to an engaged, continual player like us. You know, we've wrung a lot of value out of that, and we may be looking for that next new big thing, and those next new big things aren't necessarily on the horizon or keep getting pushed over the horizon. But you're talking about game logic. You're talking about kind of that competitiveness between the three big players. The other story here is it's been the end of the fiscal year. We've gotten some financial earnings and reports. We heard from Ubisoft as they were trying to, again, get out in front of not being bought. We had EA talking about that pretty much most of their revenue is coming in from microtransactions, and which means Madden and FIFA, more or less at this point. And then we have Sony, who had their financials as well. And Game Logic, you flagged this one as something that was insightful. So I'm going to let you take this story.
Yeah, and just before I roll with the Sony financial, just to go back to what you were saying about, my kind of summary statement on Xbox, I think one of the things for the three of us, I guess, Swiss wasn't a long-term Game Pass subscriber. One of the differences I think in maybe how I'm feeling about it right now is I didn't go Game Pass early. So Game Pass was out for 2.5 years. If you guys remember, I tipped over on Game Pass when they came out with the announcement that it was day and date and when they launched to PC. So right now, and I'm on PC Game Pass now, right now, even my problem as a long-term consumer is the rate of big AAA games coming into that service, which would justify the day and date value proposition, has slowed and become unpredictable to the point where I'm like, well, I don't know that I'm hitting my $180 break even point where I would say, hey, if I play 3 AAA games in a year, then it justifies the cost. I'm at the point now where I'm like, I would be arguably better off just waiting and buying those titles when they came out at cost, right? Because I don't know that I'm hitting my break even point. So that's just,
I can see that, right? Because there really isn't on the horizon now. There isn't anything big in terms of AAA. Yeah, that does make a difference.
So I think the only thing pertinent, I don't want to go through all of the Sony financials. I think people have seen them. I think the main thing that I'll focus on, because it's the thing that Sony put up, which, as I reminded people, look, what all these corporations do is they cherry pick the one financial metric that makes them look the best for investors. So I'll focus on operating income, and operating income is profit before earnings and taxes, before interest and taxes. Although it's kind of funny that that's the textbook definition of operating income, but yet EBIT, which you would think would be exactly that, actually incorporates additional earnings and cost into it. So from FY20 to FY21, and I apologize, I did not do the conversions. I've kind of done them with one of my assistants in the room, but I didn't write them down. They were pretty flat from FY20 to FY21, an increase in operating income of only about 5 billion yen. But I think the thing that's significant and the thing that seems to have been missed in a lot of the conversation and even the journalist coverage, as far as their projections for next year, is that they are projecting a 41 billion yen drop, which I don't know if somebody wants to run the calculator on that, but I want to say that that's like $300 million or something like that. But the point is that after the, part of this is the dynamic of the years of the pandemic, and people staying at home and wanting to spend more money. But this is also partially because what it seems to indicate to me is a couple of dynamics. It seems to indicate to me increased investment from Sony. They talk a little bit about the fact that they'll have expenses to write down if the acquisition of Bungie goes through. But they also talk about that they expect increased costs for game software development, which happens when you acquire a bunch of studios. So you wind up having to fund those studios to make those games. And, and next year, PlayStation is going to be doing more of that than they have in the past. They have talked about their 10 live service games that are in development pipeline. One of the things to consider and think about is, again, those live service games are great and they make money and there are lots of people who enjoy playing them, but the market's only going to bear so many. And concurrent playership is what makes those things a going concern, and things that drop below the threshold to keep them going are, fail. So I right now don't really understand how Sony is going to put 10 live action service games out on the market and expect them all to thrive, and for their costs and their investment in developing those games to be recouped. That seems like kind of a dubious business proposition. Now, again, what I don't know is what is the release cadence for those. I don't know if they're all going to exist on the market at the same time. I don't know if Sony is looking at some unique things like putting a thing out there and letting it live for a certain amount of time and then taking it down and like doing things less than like the 10-year Bungie Destiny 2 plan. What I will say that no, I won't say that. So their approach on first party exclusives, I have always contended, is that the content and the narrative of them has always appealed to a wide variety of gamers. So you have a Ratchet and Clank, you have The Last of Us 2, which is kind of action, horror, dystopian, Walking Dead kind of content. Ratchet and Clank, which is kind of more cartoony content. Uncharted, which hits like your action adventure types, your lovers of things like Indiana Jones. So they have a decent spread. Maybe they're going to take that approach to live service games too. What would be really interesting, I will admit, is if they put something like kind of a cozy game, like I was just about to say Animal Planet, Animal Kingdom, Animal Crossing on the market, and made that a viable alternative to Nintendo, and kind of kept it a little more active in terms of service delivery of new content. That could be interesting, but that would be the point, that it would seem that they would need to create a good amount of product differentiation out on the market for those things to do well. But I think the big story here is I don't think a lot of people were cheerleading and rah-rahing and slapping themselves on the back about like, good on you, Sony. And I'm like, you guys did realize that they didn't really make that much additional profit, additional operating income year to year. And you guys do realize that they are planning on making less next year, and that means that they're going to be investing money. One of the things, though, in terms of reading the tea leaves, it may also mean that, kind of like we were just talking about with Starfield, I think their fiscal year ends in the same quarter that Microsoft's does. And so this may also indicate, right, a big release such as maybe God of War, or potentially increased R&D that is going to a PlayStation 5 Pro. That may see heavy investment over the next fiscal year. I don't know. Did you guys have any thoughts?
Yeah, I looked a little bit at the slide deck that you shared. You're right in terms of looking at the operating income over the past couple, 20 to 21. It's not a huge change in the gaming section. The overall operating income for Sony jumps significantly, but a lot of that was in pictures. And that's COVID related. Here, it really was an only 5 billion yen difference, and the 3941 decrease that they're talking about for next year. They cite that 44 of that is from Bungie, is the acquisition of Bungie there. So there's definitely some built-in pieces. They do. Some of the increase they do say about first party titles, so it does seem like there's the impact of increased sales in first party titles. So they're anticipating at least something big next fiscal year, or potentially more. But I completely agree with you that we've seen how many live service games launch, struggle, and die. And it's a narrowing market, and then to still think that there's room not only for one successful one, but for, as many as you can count on your hands. So it's problematic. And it also could just be, they're going to throw a whole bunch at the wall and hope something sticks. Like kind of forecasting that everything is going to be successful, but they're going to hit that kind of broad range and hopefully grab something along the way. Yeah, I think the trepidation that you expressed around Microsoft certainly could be shared here in terms of Sony and its kind of long-term. Yeah, PlayStation 5 is going to continue to sell well, but in terms of what counts as a healthy industry, I don't know. And I also think, truthfully, I think that the pairing of all three of these stories to me is a good forecast of our industry in terms of we're going to see more and more frequent indie titles because of the scope, because of the smaller teams. We're going to see more of those releases than we are the big AAA tentpole pieces, whether it's for development, whether it's for long life cycle costs, or poor structural decisions in terms of, just the other week we had the Square and Embracer sell off of Western studios with Crystal Dynamics. Like that was supposed to be, Avengers was supposed to be a big tentpole game and in that live service feat, and it never stuck. So trying to always chase the trends of 5 years ago it is always a challenge.
Yeah, and the last thing that I'll mention is one of the other notes that's telling in their earnings report was for operating income for this fiscal year that they just ended. They cited one of the upsides to those increases in operational income was that they had a decrease in loss resulting from strategic price points for PlayStation 5 hardware that were set lower than manufacturing costs. And so, again, I wouldn't get like super exuberant about that, but that's a statement that seems indicative of their ability, that they've started closing the gap on the typical loss that new console hardware is sold at. And so potentially manufacturing costs are coming down, or it could be more of a business model thing where they're like overcharging and making great margin on things like colored stinking controllers and side plates in comparison to how much those things cost. And they're strong arming that to close the gap on how much the actual PlayStation 5 is costing them to manufacture.
I would say that seems very likely, that $50 for 2 plastic shells is probably not the actual production cost of that. So, all right, gentlemen, we got a little bit of time here yet before we wrap things up. So let's do some quick hits of anything else we've been playing. Tal, you've been quiet here for a little bit, so I'm going to kick this to you first. In our Switch Indie report, you talked about Totally Accurate Battle Simulator, and you also have Humans Fall Flat, which is, again, kind of a physics action game on your list of things that you've been playing. So last time I remember you talking about this, you were playing it with your son. Is that still true? Are you playing it by yourself or with the family?
No, this one I was just playing by myself. Even though it is multiplayer. I haven't played it with anybody else yet, though. And yeah, so last week I had mentioned how I had fell off of it when I was playing it earlier in the year, or actually I think last year, because I got stuck on a part, and I finally got past that part. I'm playing through it again now. Now I'm stuck on another part. So I don't know if I just like went totally the wrong way in this level I'm at. It's kind of like a factory almost. So it's like little sections of kind of enclosed areas. Looks like a factory, but somehow I got like on top of like the whole thing, so I was able to walk around and just like drop into different spots, which I figured out later on was probably not how I'm supposed to do it because I got stuck again. Like I couldn't get past like a certain part. So I have to go back and I have to figure out like what I did wrong, or how if I even went the correct way when I was initially going through this little entrance way to this little factory area. So, but otherwise, yeah, I'm still having fun with this game. It's physics based, and you only have like jump, and you can raise your arms up and like grab on the things. That's pretty much your controls, and that's it. So, it's a fun little game though. So I'm enjoying it, and I think I don't know if it's still on, but it might be on Xbox Game Pass still. I'm not sure. I have to go back.
It was at one point. I played it with my son on Game Pass. So
But I mean, yeah, I mean the graphics are super simple. Just like this blobby guy. So it's nothing like too sophisticated that the Switch can't even handle. So I mean, it's fine. So. Then actually, that might have been the reason I bought on the Switch, maybe because I couldn't get it on Game Pass anymore. So, but yeah, just running through that, and hopefully I'll get past this part soon, so I can go through that.
All right, Game Logic, you've been playing a little bit of Everspace.
Yeah, so this is a 2017 space flight simulator that I've had for quite some time, but never just got around to it. It is and Kakeros would correct me because I may not be using the right term, but let's see, we'll go with Rogue Light tonight. And it's a roguelite. You attempt to progress the game, and if at any point your ship is taken out, you go all the way back to the beginning. I think I've progressed enough that even if you fail out in so each, I'll call it sector of space, has multiple nodes in it, and so you jump from node to node to node. In sector 1, there's 5 nodes, so I have progressed into sector 2. But when I failed, I went all the way back to the beginning of Sector 1. So I don't think that there's any kind of midpoint fail back, which is definitely going to be an issue for me with uptake, because I don't particularly like that element of a roguelite when they implement it that way. I would have been okay if I would have failed back to the beginning of Sector 2. But I don't really feel like going all the way back to replay Sector 1 when I've already played it before. The game doesn't have great flight control system support, which is obviously one of my big things about playing a space flight simulator. It is there. I've seen some people who have been very extreme about claiming that it doesn't have support, and I'm like, well, just because you have to calibrate it doesn't mean that it doesn't have any support at all. Just means you got to do a little work beforehand. And so that's there. I just don't know. There's not a huge ton of variance in weapons. The other thing, I think the thing that really kind of grates me is the game doesn't tell you anything. And so, for instance, I was in Sector 2. I was approaching a space station relic for my first time, space station hull. I had seen freighters, live freighters, derelict freighters, and figured out how to, salvage from them. But I was approaching this derelict space station for the first time. And there was multiple factors of that the game didn't tell you. It had still had shields active, but you couldn't tell the way shields normally work in a lot of science fiction is they are things that physical structures can pass through, but they stop energy. You don't know which type of shield it is. There's 2 security features that are still active, but you see the red line gate moving over there. That shouldn't be anything that can bother you. But then there's another thing that's highlighted red, and you're like, is that a turret? Is that a shock screen? I don't know. And so I failed out at that point. But again, it failed me all the way back to Sector 1. And I'm like, look, okay, I don't mind you sending me back to Sector 1 as punishment, but you need to convey to me what the heck I'm supposed to do with this thing and not just have me constantly do trial and error to figure it out. So it doesn't really do that balance, for a roguelike that I feel like it has to be there to make it actually a game and not just a punishment simulator. So
is there's not any type of kind of consistent progression? If I think of some of the roguelikes that I've enjoyed, I'm starting all the way back over at the beginning, but there's some, whether it's a currency, whether it's some XP, there's something that stays with me that unlocks things as I go.
Yeah, and so you earn credits along the way when you find them floating in space and go pick them up. If you never go pick them up and you never find any, you don't earn any. But that's there. And then when you go back to the starting space station or whatever, then you can add perks and buy new ships and things like that. The problem I have right now is, like I said, you can apply them in different ways. You can buy wholesale new ships. I haven't earned enough to really do that in a single run. You can buy new systems for your ship. I haven't really done that, earned enough to, and then the third thing is you can buy perks and add-ons to systems you already have. So I'm doing that third one. The problem I have is that I have yet to spend money on any of those things and really be able to kind of tangibly feel in combat the next time I go out the difference that they're providing. So there's not a lot of differentiation in adding those things on, and that again to me is a problem. If you're going to send people all the way back to the beginning, then I need to be, in Elden Ring, right, as I went through those progressions, I definitely a tangible, right, uptick in impact in combat, right, as you went back out after you were sent back to, a Shrine of Grace or whatever it's called. But this thing doesn't have that kind of visceral tangibility as you bolt each of those additional perks on.
So Everspace 2 is out in early access, came out last year in early access. Do you know if there's any systems-wise that they've modified anything, or is it just kind of an update of what you've been describing?
I don't know that for certain. My approach to it was like before I was going to plunk down and invest in Everspace 2, I wanted to go back to Everspace 1 which I already had. And from the minimum amount that I've read about Everspace 2, I don't know that anything is a huge, huge bow wave improvement. It sounds and reads like more of the same. With a different setting and a different narrative. So this one's going to go in the backlog for a little bit. I'll get back to it and I'll platform off of that to checking things out in Everspace 2 once I've built out a little more foundational knowledge of kind of where this thing sits. So I'm not hard against Everspace 2. I haven't seen any indicator from a breadcrumb that would make me swerve in that direction, from where I am now.
Sounds good. Well, I'll give a quick hit here on one other game that I've been playing. Had a chance to check out Horizon Forbidden West, and guess what? It's more Horizon. It's pretty. It controls really well. If I always have enjoyed the narrative in Horizon, but I bounced off the actual gameplay multiple different times. And I'm kind of feeling that same way. It feels like more Horizon. So I got it through Gamefly and I've already sent it back. It is something where I will wait for a deep sale on it to pick it up. It's a beautiful world. The combat is enjoyable. It's, there's crafting aplenty, plenty of things to pick up and craft. But it also just feels like I've played it before. So the scale's a little different, that aspect of it, but it isn't giving me any type of new experience that gave me a reason to kind of stick with it. So if you've enjoyed Horizon Zero Dawn, you probably already have this and have played it and are well on your way of completing it at this point, since it did launch earlier in the year. But as for me, I'll move on to something else. So, and we are moving on from this episode as well, gentlemen. So in a couple of weeks, as we always do, once a month, we give ourselves an assignment, a Picks Plays assignment. This month is related to the metaverse and all those games that try to cross over and either bring in real world events, guest stars, characters, or other fictions that they cross over with, or stretch out into other media and IPs. There's a lot of opportunity here to kind of dive in. This, is probably a reason that Tao will just play more Fortnite, but that's okay. And it's for me. I have already downloaded Warzone again for the first time in a year and a half. And the Godzilla Kong aspect of Monarch and that franchise has me intrigued about that gameplay mode in terms of the ability when the monsters attack in a battle royale. So that is what I'm looking at, but you will have to stick around, come back in a few weeks for us to hear how our discussion is there. Next week, we will all be here. Game Logic, you will be on the mic. And as always, we'll have plenty to talk about. There will be more news, maybe some new releases, maybe some more delays, but we will be here to kind of wrap up the week and to give our perspective, analysis, and a little bit of our own gaming experiences along the way. Tao, Game Logic, any final thoughts for the evening? All right. Thank you for listening, watching, whether it's now and while we are streaming, whether you're picking it up on your pod catcher of choice. Thank you for joining us, and please come on back. We're glad to have you here. So for myself, DBQ Hams, Game Logic, and Talmaster99, play the games you love those you play with, and be kind out there. Good night.
Abu Qatar